This is very nearly the video I would like to have watched myself before I moved from the iPhone 15 Pro to an iPhone 16 Pro Max. Only because of the size. I mean, Apple Intelligence, when it comes, the new camera control button on the side on all of the iPhone 16 range, great, fine. It's the size that's the problem or the solution. Hello, I'm William Gallagher and this is 58 Keys, which as ever, as always, is for writers. Writers like you and me who use and who write on Macs and iPhones and iPads. Do subscribe or support 58 Keys on Patreon because there's always so much to talk about. It just isn't usually bleeping at me or so very, very specific. Is the iPhone 16 Pro Max too big? Well, it's subjective, isn't it? But the thing is, this year's Max model is slightly bigger than the ones before. So if there is an issue for you, as there is for me, as there was for me, as there is for me, hopefully as not will be for me. Anyway, if there is an issue, then it is actually exacerbated this time. So faced with choosing between the two sizes, there are certainly, definitely, unquestionably, a couple of issues to think about, such as, do you need a phone at all? You've already got one. And then there's the issue of how much. These iPhones, especially the Pro models, they are far from cheap. But to me, the costing, that just makes it even more urgent that if you are going to make a choice between them, that you make the right choice for you, that I make the right choice for me. Do you know, I say that and I can hear a pro-con list coming up, a list of what's good about the bigger size and what's not, really. But despite the fact, I mean, we're talking through a video, I want to show you this issue on a video. I think this is an issue where video isn't enough. This is an issue where I think you need to actually hold the iPhones in your hand. I have held the iPhone 16 Pro Max in my hand. So here now is a retrospective pro-con list brought to you about an hour before my last chance to return my iPhone 16 Pro Max to Apple. Right, pro things first, good things first. The screen is bigger on the iPhone 16 Pro Max than on the smaller iPhones. Look at the quality of information you get here. Right? The thing is, that larger screen, it still only shows the same number of apps on it. That actually, if you take a screen grab and overlay them, you see the apps themselves, the icons, they're the same size. They're just spaced out a bit more. And then when I'm writing in Pages, for instance, I get the same amount of text on screen on the newer, bigger phone than I did on my older one. Except if I write instead on the outliner, I see more text. If I'm reading in, say, the Kindle app, well, then I see more on the page, so fewer page turns, it's just more immersive reading somehow. In Safari, well, I either see a bit more text or the images that are presented are larger. Thing is, there is a visual difference most of the time, and it's usually a good one. I should say, I mentioned Pages there. I haven't actually written very much on the iPhone yet, but I have edited an article on one, and it was good. It worked well. I mean, I did it because new toy, but also where I was, what I was doing. It was just more convenient to get out this iPhone and do that quite urgent, actually, than it was to find somewhere to sit down with my iPad and do it. I mean, I just said new toy. I think that might be a factor. In the days since I've had this new iPhone, it actually has replaced my iPad quite a bit. For a start, the iPhone 16 Pro Max is a really, really good e-reader. And the screen is also superb to watch video on. I don't have a good way yet to kind of prop it up. I've nothing like my iPad's magic keyboard stand, so I've not yet watched anything for very long, but 20-minute YouTube videos, yeah. Oh, and I started to rewatch Barbie just to see how good the colours were. But I like that film too much. I watched far too much. You can't call it work, really. Anyway. Oh, and yeah, the colours in Barbie, fantastic. The resolution on that film, and on YouTube too, delicious stuff. Actually, Barbie, you're thinking pink, and I'm not going to disagree with you, but also the sunsets in the film's opening parody of 2001, A Space Odyssey, the browns and yellows and the golden sun, simply beautiful. I could tell you, because I looked this up and because I wrote it down here, the screen on this iPhone 16 Pro Max is 2826 by 1320 pixels at 460 pixels per inch. Look, I made notes. Are you keeping notes here? I'm never actually really one for specifications. It's like they don't tell me anything. So it's a little bit more meaningful to me, a little bit. Anyway, when I had to ask AI about this, and it told me that this new screen is 25.8% bigger than the one on my iPhone 15 Pro. It is, though, the same resolution, the 460 pixels per inch as my old phone, and it's exactly the same brightness. So while this one feels better to me, looks better to me, and I enjoy watching video more on this new one than on the old one, am I just kidding myself? Also on the Pro side, although I can't actually prove this, we've got to take this as anecdotal, the call quality, the phone call quality, the audio is better. I mean, how much is because Apple's changed anything? How much because it's just a newer phone or a better phone? Or maybe that my iPhone 15 Pro just was a bit rubbish somewhere? I don't know. Better call quality. That's what I've got. The very first person who rang me when it was turned on, I just finished it and then it rang. She commented on the sound quality, unbidden. And the other day I made a dozen or more BBC radio appearances, all of them speaking through this phone. And then later listening back to their shows afterwards, it was remarkable, I thought, how good it sounds. You know, I mean the audio quality, not what I was saying. Okay. In that case, actually, BBC Radio, you've got to assume that they have some fine studio equipment, and I'm sure they do, but I've often been interviewed down the line before, and to my ears, the result was much better this time, noticeably much better. So overall, actually, I find the sound quality better even when I'm just playing music or podcasts and things. But yeah, again, can't prove it, can't measure it, but did notice it, and did notice it immediately. Related to sound, well, also related to being unmeasurable, for most of the last year or more, Siri has ignored me in the car. I can call out, let's call it Iris, yeah, just for safety. I can call out Iris or Hey Iris, and nothing happens, except people bleep at me. If you get that as well, by the way, if it isn't responding, press and hold on this button and Siri will start listening. I was going to say, I was looking forward to saying to you that since the new phone, Iris has listened every time. Yeah, but last night it didn't. Just the once though. Yeah, I don't know. Lastly, on the mostly pro side, the mostly good side, I really like the battery life. Can't yet quantify that because I plug my iPhone into the car when I'm driving and that tops up the charge. But just for one example, last Wednesday it would have been 100% at 10 a.m. when I got out of the car. And at 7 a.m. the next morning, it was on 30%. So now I can doom scroll all the night long. Yeah, you've had the pro. It's time for the con list. Starting with how I did enthuse there a bit about reading books, and I mentioned websites, more text, bigger picture, all that stuff. I think the iPhone 16 Pro Max isn't brilliant when what you want to read is a PDF, and when you turn the screen to get the largest, easiest view of one. I know I'm not being fair here, because I mean, by default, PDF opens up in portrait with just the pages, and but when you turn it to landscape, you get the page plus all of these page thumbnails, taking up enough of the screen that it means I think the larger display is a bit wasted on PDF text. But you can just very quickly tap to add the PDF to Apple Books and share it to other apps if you want. My problem with doing that though is that most of the time when I'm reading a PDF, I only want to read it once. It's for what I'm doing now, and I send it to Apple Books. I kind of clog up my Apple Books library with them. And plus, just on the fairness thing, I should say it's exactly the same with the smaller iPhone. So actually, is this wrong to call it a con? It's as in not, I don't mean a fake scam. Anyway, it's more of a not pro, let's call it that. Oh, whereas actually, okay, this is definitely on the con list, and it never occurred to me that it might be. The iPhone 16 Pro Max is heavy. It weighs, look at the notes here, William, 227 grams, while the smaller iPhone 16 Pro is 199 grams. My old iPhone 15 Pro is 187 grams, and last year's iPhone 15 Pro Max was 221 grams. There will be a test later. This year's models are heavier than last year's. That's the thing to take away. So if you're someone with shirts that have, you know, top pocket and you tend to put your phone in there, well, get AppleCare insurance right now. I used to do that. I was going to say the shirt pocket. I didn't do the AppleCare thing, but somewhere around the iPhone 11 Pro in 2019, somewhere about that, it seemed to me that the phone's got too heavy for shirt pockets, and also the camera bulge and things like that. The weight was just sort of oddly distributed, so that whichever way I would put the phone in my pocket, it felt like it was going to fall out. Since then, I've either had the phone in a jacket pocket, or kind of, well, it feels like I'm, holstering the phone into my jeans or trouser pocket or something. And actually, that's one of the reasons why I did go for the larger phone this time, because that bit, the putting it in and taking it out of the jeans pockets, not a lot of difference, but I can't feel really any difference between doing it with that, with the iPhone 16 Pro Max, or with the iPhone 15 Pro. But it's when it's out of the pocket, when it's in my hand, I am very aware of the weight thing, and I don't seem to stop being aware of it. Certainly I'm constantly careful of it because I'm constantly aware of its weight, which, I said I wasn't expecting that. It has turned out to be more of an issue in my mind than I expected, and actually even more so than the issue that you would think would be a bit more obvious. I don't think, that even people with very large hands can use the iPhone Pro Max one-handed. I don't think it's physically possible. So either you use two, or you jiggle the phone, get into your buttons and apps. You can jiggle and possibly juggle. Anyway, and you can make it work, but that motion plus the weight of it feels to me like it means I'm certain to drop it at some time. So I have to use two hands. So clearly, that is on the con side of the pro-con list. Except, well, it could also be on a well-duh list for me, because actually I have pretty much the same thing with my iPhone 15 Pro. I should have expected it to be worse on the iPhone Pro Max. I did expect it to be worse, but in practice, well, for what it's worth, it turns out for me to be far less worse, far less of an issue than I was expecting in that move. That is partly because I'm using Iris a bit more, but also because I've found that actually, in general, I unconsciously hold the phone in one hand and tap or swipe away with the other. It ought to be less convenient than doing it one-handed, and you may well find it so, but for me, I think the key word there is, I just said unconsciously, didn't I? It's true, it's unconscious. I know I just do it, and the only reason I know that I recognise I just do it is that I thought about it to describe it to you. So, thanks. I should say, by the way, keeping to the well-duh theme, that if you put a case on the iPhone 16 Pro Max, it's going to be even bigger. I never put cases on iPhones. Although I'll tell you, I've thought about it this time. So I said at the top that this video is very nearly the one I would have wanted to watch before I upgraded between these two, before I bought my iPhone 16 Pro Max. To be the perfect video, it should now come down on one side or the other. It should be pro or it should be con. It should be that I was right to update to this size from the smaller iPhone, or that I wasn't. And I can't do it. I can't quite do it. I worry about the weight. Like I said, I'm now, because of you, self-conscious about one- and two-handed jiggling. And I would say, overall, I'm not seeing as enormous a benefit to having a larger screen than I expected. I'm seeing it, but it's not as enormous as I somehow expected. But there are two more things. The first is, even showing you the two models here, showing them side by side, it's somehow inescapable to me now. The iPhone 15 Pro looks tiny to me, and the iPhone 16 Pro Max looks right. When it's in my hand and I'm using it, not when I'm picking it up, then, yeah, I don't know. Also, there's this. Is this relevant? I'm not 100% sure, but you're looking at me now. I don't upgrade iPhones every year, but when I do, I give my last one to my wife and I trade in her old one from me to reduce the price of the new. She doesn't want this bigger size next year. I may not upgrade to the iPhone 17 Pro Max because I can't figure out how to solve what I give her and what gets traded in, but I've got a year to think about that. And in the meantime, that's it for this edition of 58 Keys. Thank you very much for watching, whether you watch on a big screen or a little one. Now take care of yourself, write more, and I'll see you soon.